Anyone who loses sight of the bigger picture in the crypto market right now will definitely regret it massively in a month or two. That's why it's especially important in today's video to work out a clear roadmap. What is my personal strategy? What is my personal approach? How will I proceed, especially over the course of August and September? So that's particularly important, and that's why in today's video, we'll be addressing some key core questions. Namely, do we already need to sell in September, or will the rally continue? Is the end of the bull run already upon us? We'll definitely take a look at that as well. At what point is Bitcoin truly overheated, or are we already there? And of course, what is realistically possible for 2025 in general? I've really prepared quite a bit for you in today's video. A few charts. Naturally, we'll also take a look at what's happening behind the scenes. So what's really going on that you might not be able to see directly from the charts? I've prepared some on-chain data for you as well, so definitely stick around until the end today. We'll also be dedicating some time to Ethereum and altcoins. I'll share my personal approach there and my current plan through the end of September. So that's definitely going to be especially exciting. I've also prepared a lot for that segment. That's why it's definitely worth paying close attention today. And if you're new to the channel, feel free to like and subscribe. That would really help me out a lot. Also, I want to send a huge thank you to all of you out there. It's honestly amazing how much support you've been giving over the past few days. Almost every video has a 100% like ratio. That's not easy to achieve. So once again, a big thank you to all of you for helping us build a community here that's almost free of haters. It's really, really great to see that the content is being so well received by you all. Now let's jump straight into the video content and take a look at what's currently happening with Bitcoin. At the moment, Bitcoin is trading at 118,000 US dollars. Currently, everything is still going according to plan. The loyal viewers among you definitely know what my current approach is. At this point, we still have an extremely strong correlation with the M2 money supply shown here in blue. The whole thing is shifted forward by 75 periods, so to speak. So we basically have a time lag of 75 days between global liquidity and Bitcoin, and up to now, this has played out incredibly strongly, almost eerily similar. And if we're lucky enough to be able to rely on such an indicator, in my opinion, anything else is just nonsense. Yeah, so anyone who is currently arguing against the M2 money supply, I just can't understand it, because right now the correlation is higher than ever. And why should I bet against the odds? The probability is very high that we can expect new all-time highs over the course of August, at the latest by the end of September. And that's why my personal roadmap is also very clear. I assume that we can really expect strong green numbers again in the coming weeks, and that's also what my personal strategy looks like. We've also discussed important price targets in the last videos, so my personal roadmap is definitely that we could reach around 140,000 US dollars for Bitcoin by the end of September. This is also very clearly reflected in many charts. So now I'd like to talk a bit about the overlaps, so to speak. Here we currently have a chart showing the all-time highs for Bitcoin. In this case, since 2017, I've connected the bull run tops, so to speak, and we've had an incredibly strong resistance above us, which in this case was officially broken at the beginning of July on a weekly basis. And right now we are in the middle of the consolidation phase with the 2x Fibonacci level above us, and below us we have extremely strong support from our ultimate resistance, which I would say has held throughout every cycle and has now been broken. That's why below us we have $113,000. Extremely strong resistance. It's practically like a spring that's being compressed right now, even for Bitcoin. If there is ever a weekly candle close above $122,000, then this resistance will officially be broken, and from there it will move relatively quickly to the 2.414 Fibonacci level. So that's definitely my current plan, just so you're aware. What we can also see very clearly is that we currently have strong support below us. At the moment, the momentum is really extremely strong. We still have the yellow cloud present. We also still have both bands here, which are relatively far apart. So there is definitely good support below us here. Yes, the foundation we're currently building on is definitely stronger than ever. If you're wondering at this point, Mr. Vincent, what exactly are these two indicators? Everyone who is in my free Telegram group gets access to both indicators, just so you're aware. And as I said, just to recap, the $140,000 mark definitely comes with a lot of data. For example, we can also see from the power law model that the exact middle band is located between $136,000 and $140,000. That's why the next price target for Bitcoin is definitely set there, and this also aligns very well with the logarithmic regression. Here, we've also shown the fair value band in orange. All of you know, especially the loyal viewers among you, that this is by far my favorite Bitcoin chart because it gives us very strong insights. Is Bitcoin overheated? Where are we currently positioned? Where is there currently strong support or strong resistance above us? And here we can clearly see that the exact middle band is at 140,000 US dollars. So you can definitely see very clearly that the 140,000 US dollars is an important level for Bitcoin, and this middle band has always been kind of the make it or break it point for Bitcoin. That's why, as we saw back then at the end of 2024 in December, we dipped exactly to the middle band, and now again there's the possibility that Bitcoin on its next leg up, on its next pump, could reach this price range. So definitely remember this. 136,000 US dollars to 140,000 US dollars is clearly the next price target. This aligns with a lot of charts and also fits perfectly with global liquidity. So at this point, that is definitely the first price target, the first interim price target. And now we come to the question, so do we already need to sell in September or will the rally continue? So that's basically the core question of today's video. Will I be hedging myself accordingly at the end of September? And I can clearly say yes to that at this point. So I'm being completely honest with you here. I will definitely hedge myself to a certain extent. If Bitcoin really does make this run up in a relatively short time, of course, at the end of the day, I personally don't have a crystal ball. It could also briefly go in the other direction. We also have to keep in mind that there is still liquidity below us at the moment. It's very, very possible that Bitcoin could correct again to $114,000 or even down to $113,000. As I said, we discussed this scenario. Personally, I'm not worried at all, as long as the momentum band is still below us and we currently have extremely strong support from the bull run tops below us, so as mentioned, around $113,000. As long as that's the case, I have absolutely no concerns. And that's why it's extremely important that you absolutely do not lose sight of the bigger picture. Theoretically, some bad news could hit the market tomorrow, and then it's quite possible that Bitcoin could correct back down to $114,000, but you must not let that throw you off at all. You must never lose sight of the bigger picture. And for me personally, the picture is quite clear. We can expect new all-time highs in the near future, and that's also my personal approach. And simply because the current correlation is so extremely strong, and every time global liquidity, let's say, reaches a short-term peak and then corrects back down, we've seen a correction in Bitcoin every single time as well. We saw it here, and we also saw it in April. In April, when Bitcoin corrected to 74,000 US dollars. Here too, the trigger was global liquidity. Here as well, global liquidity flattened out, and that's why I personally want to protect myself against such a scenario. Of course, it's still a very, very big difference whether you make a general exit at the end of September. So it's definitely a huge difference whether you say you're making a complete exit, liquidating your entire portfolio because you think the bull run is over. In my opinion, that's not the case yet at the end of September. Personally, I also believe that global liquidity will continue to rise and that the cycle will keep extending towards November, December, January 2026, so up to Q1 2026. I definitely find it hard to imagine that we've already hit the ultimate bull run top here and that we'll immediately enter a bear market. It's rather unrealistic in my view. Nevertheless, it's important to protect yourself in your own portfolio, especially after potentially taking good profits by the end of September so that you're in a better position and may be able to buy another dip or two. So that's definitely my current approach, that I'm preparing myself for such a scenario. But of course, I'll keep you updated about this on this YouTube channel. When the time comes to take partial profits, I'll definitely let you know, so you'll be perfectly prepared. But I want to make it absolutely clear at this point, if I make any speculations about November or December, these are purely crystal ball predictions. At the end of the day, I honestly have no idea what will actually happen by the end of the year or by the beginning of 2026. By then, I will definitely make new forecasts again. For now, we just have to wait and see what happens until the end of September, beginning of October, and from that point on, we can reevaluate, take another look at what's happening in the market, whether Bitcoin is really overheated, and then we can make new decisions. But until the end of September, my plan is definitely set, so you're definitely in the loop about that. Very briefly on question number 2, does that mean the bull run will already be over by the end of September? In my opinion, no. If we look at the current on-chain indicators, whether Bitcoin is overheated right now or not, there is definitely still quite a bit of room to grow. At the moment, all the risk metrics are in the middle range, currently sitting at a value of 0.5. And here we can also see very clearly that in the last cycles, we dipped deep into the red zone. And that's definitely not something we can see in this cycle yet. We did briefly dip into the dark orange zone here, but at the moment, everything is still in the green. We definitely still have room to grow, and no matter which on-chain indicators I look at right now, yes, the market is currently warm, but it's not overheated yet. So we definitely still have room to grow, and that's why I'm not at all worried about any profit taking at the moment. I'm not at all worried right now that the bull run is over or anything like that. We can definitely still expect new all-time highs. But if all these on-chain indicators start overheating, or if they clearly signal to me that the cycle could soon be coming to an end, then I will definitely be much more cautious than I am right now. But at the moment, no matter which indicator I look at, we still have room to grow. We can see it here as well. Yes, we're in the warm zone. We're no longer completely in the cool zone like we were back in the bear market, but still there's room to grow and we don't need to worry just yet. And that's how my current plan is structured as well. If we take a look at the whole thing from the perspective of the last cycles, we can look here at the 27 cycle and the 2021 cycle. So we've basically shown the 2017 cycle in orange, the 2021 cycle in green, and here's the current cycle. And we definitely saw that up until around January or February of this year, the current cycle was almost identical to the others. And that's also why the current bull run feels noticeably different, or at least somewhat different, because we've definitely seen a mini cycle break there, or rather a clear deviation in correlation compared to the previous cycles. And that's why, in my opinion, it's definitely possible that the current cycle might stretch out a bit. Of course, I don't want to bet against time and data either. That definitely wouldn't be very smart, but still, if you take a look at the whole thing, there's still room to grow here, or rather, we definitely still have time at this point. So these last 20%, this blow-up phase that's still to come, that definitely hasn't happened yet. If you look at the whole thing based on the last cycles, we currently still have about 3 months left, as far as this cycle is concerned. But honestly, I could even imagine that this cycle might last a bit longer. But for that, we definitely need to keep a close eye on the on-chain indicators. So making any wild predictions now that this cycle would be different or last longer definitely wouldn't be very smart either. We absolutely have to keep a very, very, very close eye on the on-chain indicators and just strictly observe the market to see whether we're overheating or not. So that's definitely my current approach. And that's why I'm making the face cam bigger again here. But now you're definitely up to speed on question number 2. In my opinion, the bull run will definitely last longer than the end of September, but we'll have to make new decisions then. Yeah, making any speculations now about what could happen definitely wouldn't be very smart. We'll definitely have a much clearer picture once we get to the end of September. That's all for now on that topic. Other than that, we also discussed the question, Bitcoin is definitely not overheated at the moment, but as Bitcoin reaches new all-time highs, we're slowly but surely entering areas where you have to take a closer look to see whether Bitcoin is overheating or not. As I said, if you look at the whole thing based on the logarithmic regression, the overheated zone for Bitcoin would only be at around 170,000 US dollars. So there's definitely still room to grow. That's why for now everything is still relaxed. Until then, we definitely have to keep an eye on things. That's the current approach. As I said, this is consistent with quite a few charts. So now you're definitely up to speed. If you take a look at the whole thing based on sentiment analysis, we currently have a value of 57, which is surprisingly low, I have to say. If you compare the current prices to the present sentiment analysis, we can clearly see that we're still lagging behind quite a bit, or rather that we're building on a very, very healthy foundation. So at the moment, there's really no need to worry that we're already overheating or anything like that. Yes, a value of 57 is extremely healthy, and it definitely means that we still have plenty of room to grow. The last time we had a value of 57 was also back when Bitcoin was at 60,000 US dollars or 66,000 US dollars, and then with the next push, we went up to 106,000 US dollars until this extreme greed phase happened again here. So you can definitely see that there is still plenty of room to grow here, and everything currently looks very solid. The same goes for the current forecasts regarding interest rate cuts. I don't want to go into that too much in today's video, but right now a positive scenario, a positive outcome is being priced in, and this is also reflected accordingly in the traditional markets. So if we take a look at the S&P 500, we can clearly see that one all-time high after another is being surpassed. And what often happens after such strong corrections is that the market continues to climb for several more stages. So for something like this to happen now is very, very unrealistic, even in the traditional market. And we have to be very clear about this. The traditional market, both the Nasdaq and the S&P 500, is extremely strongly correlated with Bitcoin. We can overlay the Bitcoin chart and you'll notice that the correlation is strikingly similar. It's almost crazy how the trends are nearly identical, almost one-to-one, and this is clearly noticeable. Right now we have a value of 80. So, as I said, the current correlation, looking at the short term, not over years but on a daily and weekly basis, is extremely, extremely high, almost higher than ever before. And you definitely always have to include this in your analysis, making sure to keep an eye on what the traditional markets are currently doing. That's why I wanted to include it in today's video. Otherwise, no matter which on-chain indicators I look at, and I don't want to get too technical here or anything like that, but the current long-term holders are still accumulating, they're still buying more, so this gives us a clear indication and a clear signal that professional investors are still buying more. It's definitely nice to see that as well. And what you can also currently observe is that the current stablecoin supply has reached a new all-time high. This is also extremely remarkable because at the end of the day, we have to keep one thing in mind. New liquidity, fresh liquidity, is the fuel for rising prices. It's basically the dry gunpowder. It's like the gas tank for a car that, so to speak, gets things moving. And it's exactly the same for the crypto market. We need stablecoins, we need fresh liquidity so that the market gets fired up. And we can clearly see that many investors are currently preparing themselves very intensively for a new run-up or are just waiting to invest their capital in the crypto market. So it's definitely nice to see that on-chain we're currently building on a very, very healthy and solid foundation. That's all there is to say about that for now. As I mentioned, I've also prepared a liquidity heat map. I don't want to sound too bullish at this point. I also don't want to report from just one perspective, but I think the current roadmap is very, very clear for all of you. Still, I want to make it very clear before any comments pop up again. Hey Vincent, you were so bullish and now all of a sudden Bitcoin is at 114,000 US dollars on a Tuesday afternoon or a Wednesday. Yes, that could very well happen because right now, on a 2-week basis, we have a lot of liquidity below us. Of course, the interest from the market makers is correspondingly very, very high to push the price down again here and to scoop up all that liquidity. Something like that can definitely happen, but as long as we stay above 113,000 US dollars, as long as the strong support below us is not breached, everything is still intact and the overall roadmap remains in place. That's why I personally still have all my long positions open, and especially for those of you who are in my free Telegram group, you definitely know what my plan is, you definitely know what my trades are doing, etc. So you'll always be up to date there anyway. As I said, I've linked everything in the video description. Otherwise, let's continue now with the topic of Ethereum and altcoins. That's also how I want to wrap up today's video. Currently, with Ethereum, as I've said in previous videos, we still have a very, very strong resistance above us, namely at $4,800. That is exactly the all-time high from the last cycle. We can see it right here. And only when this resistance is truly and officially broken, that's when the real party begins, so to speak, and a new price discovery phase starts for Ethereum, which I would say is very, very bullish. And then we can also expect significantly higher prices here. I don't want to make any direct price predictions at this point, but you definitely know. As soon as Ethereum reaches a new all-time high, this will also be reflected in the altcoin market, because then liquidity can start to trickle through accordingly. We're also getting a bullish cross on a monthly basis in the MACD indicator. I mentioned that in the last video as well. And currently with the KVBSO, my own indicator, we're actually also getting a bullish cross here, which is extremely, extremely strong and of course enormously important for Ethereum's long-term trend. We've finally come out of this negative histogram now. It's definitely nice to see that we're getting very clear signals here. But still, as I said, at the moment the resistance hasn't been broken yet. That's why we first have to wait until the next weekly candles are completed and then we can, let's say, make new decisions regarding Ethereum. But as I said, overall this looks very good. The trend in the dependency of Ethereum to Bitcoin has also been broken, so I can easily imagine that in the coming months, Ethereum will clearly outperform Bitcoin. We have been bleeding out there for a very, very long time. For a very long time, Bitcoin performs significantly better than Ethereum, but in my opinion, the trend has now officially been broken, just so you're aware. Otherwise, what we can take another look at is that the Ethereum short-term holders are once again getting scared. So I really wanted to make sure to include this clearly in today's video, especially for beginners, because if you can't handle these minor dips, you haven't earned a single euro in the crypto market. And that's just the bitter truth at the end of the day. It's the harsh reality. If you already start selling off and getting scared during these small mini sell-offs in Ethereum, just because Ethereum corrects back by $100 or $200, then at the end of the day, you haven't earned anything in the crypto market. So you definitely need to be careful not to get shaken out. But here we can still see how this systematic redistribution of wealth is taking place. The short-term holders, the newcomers to the market, are handing over their coins to experienced investors. You see this happening again and again. That's why I wanted to include it here as well. Otherwise, here's another on-chain chart, which once again shows that Ethereum is currently catching up to Bitcoin extremely strongly. And all of this is, of course, very clearly noticeable here, I would say also in this chart, where we can clearly see that the trend of Ethereum's dependence on Bitcoin is now officially over. Otherwise, I would now like to talk about the altcoin market again. We're looking at this on a weekly basis, and here all altcoins are added together and shown in the chart. So this is essentially the crypto total market cap, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. We've basically added up every single altcoin as a chart, as shown here, but Bitcoin and Ethereum are not included in this calculation. What you can clearly see here is that so far, we haven't seen a new all-time high when it comes to altcoins themselves. Then we came right up to the all-time high from 2021, in this case here in November, December of last year. And now at the moment, we're slowly but surely moving back into that area. It's going to be extremely, extremely exciting to see if we can make it this time. I think that if Bitcoin prepares for its next leg up, if Bitcoin rises to 140,000 US dollars and then accordingly Ethereum also sets a new all-time high, then the altcoins will also enter a new price discovery phase. We can also currently see here on the KVBSO that we still have a yellow cloud below us, which definitely speaks for a very healthy foundation and strong relative strength. And that's why I also believe that with the next push, the altcoins will definitely benefit disproportionately strongly. Now, to conclude, the last chart is the Bitcoin dominance. We are still at the Fibonacci golden pocket level at the 0.65, 0.6198 level. In this case, it is a strong support for Bitcoin dominance. It's kind of a make it or break it point because if this support is broken, then it will move fairly quickly to the levels from November, December 2024, basically in this case to the 0.5 Fibonacci level, and from the current point, that would mean another drop in Bitcoin dominance of about 6 to 7%. It's not all that much compared to what we've seen recently, but the current drop was mainly triggered only by Ethereum. I think the next drop in Bitcoin dominance will definitely benefit the altcoins much, much more, and then we will, I would say, reach levels again similar to what we saw in November, December 2024. Will it be enough for a real altcoin season? Personally, I doubt it. Personally, I could well imagine that something like that might happen again, and that the real altcoin season will actually only take place in September or January, and that only then, I would say, will we reach levels of around 45%, something in that range. But I'll keep you updated on that anyway. It doesn't make any sense at all to make any dubious speculations here if we haven't reached that point yet. That's why it's extremely important that you definitely stay up to date here on this YouTube channel. Of course, I'll make sure to provide you with content and videos. That's all for today's video in any case. If the question comes up briefly about where I personally buy cryptocurrencies at the moment, I can definitely recommend Bitpanda to you. At the moment, it is the best MiCA-regulated exchange, so if you're looking for a reputable exchange, Bitpanda is definitely your best choice. And for those of you who are actively trading, the best exchange is definitely Bitunix. So I personally make all my trades here. At the moment, there's also a $400 futures bonus. Basically, you get $400 completely free if you deposit $2,000 accordingly. And by the way, everyone who has an account on Bitunix also gets completely free access to all my personal indicators. So you'll be fully taken care of in that regard as well. That's all I have to say about that for now. Enough with the advertising now. Thank you very much for your attention. Feel free to write in the comments what your current plan is, and also your opinion about today's video or my personal approach. Of course, you don't have to follow it exactly as I do, but I think my approach is fairly reasonable at this point in time. And as I said, we'll take another look at things at the end of September. At the end of September, we'll be making completely new decisions again. So it's definitely important to subscribe here. Otherwise, as I said, thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you again in the next video.